Wenham FinCom is here. We'll call the meeting to order. Wenham FinCom at 7:06. A brief roll call. Jim Purdy.
Scott Schoenberger is here.
Scott.
David Molitano is here.
David.
David Reed is here.
Okay. We're all present.
Thank you. And maybe Hamilton Select Board?
All right, Hamilton Select Board, do a roll call. So Rosie?
Rosie Kennedy here.
All right, and Darcy?
Darcy Dale here.
And Sean?
John Farrell present.
All right, and Jamie Knutson present. That's it for the Select Board. We have some town officials here. I guess that you guys all know them, or they'll introduce themselves later.
All right, and this is Christina Schenk-Hargrove. I'll call the Hamilton Finance and Advisory Committee meeting to order on Wednesday, 7:08 p.m. Do I have David Wanger?
Present.
Nick Tenson? Oh, you're on mute, Nick.
Mute, I'm a mute. Nick Tesin present.
John Prulich
John Prulich, present.
and John,
John McGrath, present.
everyone present and accounted for.
Okay, fantastic. Think, I think we're ready to just, I'm going to turn it, Eric, to you, I think. We're going to give some budget information unless we feel like there are other, I think that's next on our agenda.
Yeah, Vinny's on mute and it looks like he's been trying to figure out a sound issue.
Yeah, I just got off the phone with him. He's going to try to call in. He's having an issue with his audio.
Okay. Thank you for that, Michelle. I'm not seeing that, but I'm sure that that's going on. Okay. Is there anyone that we missed that's on the meeting that hasn't been introduced?
I'll just say that Joe Domlovitz, Town Manager, Town of Hamilton, and Finance Director Alex McGee are both here.
Hi. And I'd like to introduce Jamie Cologne, our Finance Director in Wenham.
Wonderful, thank you.
We have another Joe Domlovitz in the meeting as well. I don't know who that is. Somebody obviously used my link accidentally. If they could identify themselves or rename themselves, it would be great.
I'm sorry, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we got you, Vinny.
Now we hear you, Vinny.
Beautiful. Sorry, it's on my phone, so if I sound weird through my phone, I apologize. Something's wrong with my computer.
It actually sounds okay, I think, as long as you keep the phone up there, it sounds okay.
Okay, I will keep it close. Sorry about that.
Okay, Vinny, you're on.
Oh, okay, I couldn't hear anything either. Sorry. All right, now let me pull up the presentation.
Okay, yeah, so I think you're up. We're gonna do some budget presentation right now.
All right, I'm just gonna make sure you can still hear me, right?
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you guys for coming tonight. We are gonna present to you our superintendent's initial FY23 budget recommendation as it stands from our December 2nd school committee meeting. So what I like to do when I build the budget is start off with the assessment shift. This has a lot to do, obviously, with the town assessment from year to year. So what we're seeing this year is a shift of almost 1%. This is nearly double what it was last year. Last year came in at just around 0.58%. So what this basically means is an assessment shift of approximately $320,000 going towards Hamilton and away from Wenham. So in other words, further on in the presentation, you'll see an operating assessment increase to Wenham of approximately 5.5%. 1.4% of this relates directly to the assessment shift. So it is in addition to the operating increase that we're seeing, you're also seeing an additional 1.4% due to the assessment shift. In terms of Wenham, later on in the presentation, you'll see an increase of approximately 1.2%. It would have normally been just under 4%, but it is reduced by approximately 2.7%. And again, that is because of the assessment shift alone. So the next thing is our FY23 budget challenges. The very first thing right out of the gate is a makeup of approximately 1% of our COLA. So while building our FY22 budget, I originally incorporated a 2% COLA. This was unknown at the time. The end of FY21 was the end of our 3 union contracts. During the budget process, 1% was stripped out, which only left 1%. And when the negotiations were final, it came in at roughly 2%. So right off the bat, we're making up roughly $230,000 from that 1% COLA not included in the 22 budget. On top of that, the negotiations came in at another 2% COLA for FY23. So combined, we're looking at a 3% COLA growth budget to budget, which represents an increase of approximately $700,000 just from turning the page from June 30th to July 1st. But everyone knows how our contracts work. In addition to the COLA, employees also have opportunity to gain steps and columns. As of the presentation on the 2nd, the deadline for column changes had not occurred yet. So right now I have a placeholder in, but the deadline has passed now, and I can report to you that I used a high placeholder. So in future meetings and presentations, you'll see this number decline. The next big budget challenge for us is the growth at the elementary school. Even though we have seen overall declining enrollment, our elementary schools are actually increasing in enrollment. Last year, we incorporated a 7th kindergarten class. And as that class moves through the school, there is a need to add an additional 7th teacher at each grade level if there is not a graduating bubble. Next year, there is not a graduating bubble. Therefore, we had to increase our elementary grade school teachers by approximately 1.0. Next, we're also seeing an increase of approximately 0.5 teaching staff at the secondary level. With the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, we're seeing huge increases in our technology needs. We've added hundreds of devices into our system. So therefore, there is a need not only to replace some of our equipment, but to update our technology infrastructure to handle the increased traffic. The next thing, as I spoke about earlier, is the assessment shift. We always take this into consideration because it has a huge effect on the overall net assessment to the towns. The next item is also a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. During FY21, I believe the first 10 days of school were fully remote. In addition to that, there was many programs that did not run. Therefore, we had huge savings and expenses at the end of the year. In addition to lower expenses, we also saw a lot of increases in our revenues, mainly due to Chapter 70 that you'll see later on in the presentation as well. In addition to that, for FY21, we saw our OPEB liability grow by nearly $6 million. And again, you'll see later on in the presentation that we're trying to get a handle on this and lower our future liability. As always, there's our facility issues. Our newest school is the middle school, but besides that, Our other 4 buildings are nearly 70 years old and equipment is failing left and right. Besides that, the last item is an expiring transportation contract, which is one of our biggest contracts we issue throughout the year. So that is our kind of level service adjustments. In addition to our level service, we are also seeing an adjustment related to our grants. So historically, we have always included our IDEA grant to the tune of roughly $350,000. Over the course of the past 2 or 3 years, our IDEA grant has shifted in structure, and we are putting more costs towards personnel. These teachers and TAs are now permanent staff, so there is a need to increase what we are reporting by approximately $77,000 on the IDEA grant. In addition to that, it has never been reported the personnel related to our Title I grant. We are now incorporating that into the budget this year, as well as the addition of one-time funding for our ESSER grants. These are the kind of the COVID-19 bailout money from the federal government. We're using some of those funds to add an additional 0.2 FTEs for next year to the cost of about $147,000. So these are, all 3 of these are corrections. When you add them together, it has an effect on our gross operating budget of roughly $290,000, or an increase of roughly 7 FTEs. But I would like to mention that other than the 2 additional ESSER grants, the other roughly 5 FTEs have been in the district for at least the past 4 or 5 years. So this is not new. This is just us correctly reporting it. But overall, it does have a 0.75% increase on our gross. But you'll see later on in the presentation, this does not have an effect on the town assessment. We put in an equal amount of expenses and an equal amount of revenue. Therefore, the net assessment to the town does not change. So now we've built in our level service and we've made our grant corrections. So the next approach we take is any increases to level service or any new investment. In total, Eric and I went through approximately $1.4 million of new investment requests that were submitted by the leadership team. Together with the leadership team, we identified them all, went through them, and prioritized them all. This is the list that we thought should be put through to the FY23 budget. Just to briefly go through them, there is an increase in social emotional needs and support at the high school and middle school. So we're asking for an additional 1.0 FTE at the middle school and high school. There is an addition ESL. We have a growing ESL population. Therefore, we have restructured that program. We have eliminated 1 tutor, but added in 1 1.0 teacher. The net result is an increase of approximately 0.67 FTE. In addition to that, we'd like to increase our Director of Teaching and Learning by approximately 0.3 FTEs. They're currently 0.7. This would make them full-time 1.0. As some of you might remember, during the COVID-19 reductions of in FY21, the business office lost approximately 2.2 FTEs. We are requesting that we reinstate part of those and as a 0.5 payroll clerk. On top of that, one of our top priorities was an increase to athletic user fees of approximately 5%. So these 5 items combined represent an increase of approximately 2.5 FTEs, or roughly 300,000. So now we walk through our level of service, we made our grant corrections, and we added in our new investment. Now we had to go through and handle what we were going to do with the E&D and the one-time fund. So just to give you a brief background, again, during FY21, there was so many closures because of COVID-19. We had a lot of staff cancel a lot of their professional development courses, and combined with the lower expenses, we also saw our Chapter 70 money actually come in. We anticipated it being dropped 20%. It actually went up about 2%, I believe. All of this came together, and the result was an E&D submission to the DOR of roughly $4.2 million. We are allowed by state law to hold on to 5% of that, but we have an internal school committee policy that says we are only going to hold on to 3%. For FY23, that represents $1.1 million. So we are retaining the 1.1 million. It leaves us approximately 3.1 million. During this time last year, the school committee made a promise to return any excess Chapter 70 money we received in FY21 to the towns in our FY23 budget process. We are fulfilling that commitment. We are returning the $773,000 in E&D through the budget process. Then we're left with approximately $2.4 million, which at this time we're recommending that we dedicate $325,000 to extraordinary maintenance projects. This will help our facility issues that are around the district. It will help extend the useful life of a lot of our failing equipment and get us a few more years on some of our facility issues. What's left is approximately $2 million. At this time, we're recommending that that entire balance be put into an OPEB trust fund. We believe this will stabilize the district in the future. It will help lower assessments in the future. This $2 million will be put in a trust fund that will grow interest over the future, thus resulting in lower assessments in the future. Okay, so we ran through the budget. We talked about level service, our grants, any new investments, and our use of E&D. Now, when I look at our E&D, the question came to me, why wouldn't we just return all the money? Right now, I am going to try to articulate to you what would happen if we did return that money so you guys can see why we've made the choices we've made. So in front of you is our FY23 budget without the one-time use of the additional E&D funds. So I have removed the $2 million in OPEB and the $300,000 in extraordinary maintenance. So all you are left in terms of E&D is just the $770,000 being returned to the town. This would ultimately result in an increase to our gross operating budget of roughly $2.5 million or 6.5%. From there, you remove our total offsets and total funding sources, which I'll go in detail a little bit more in the presentation, but you can see here the 3.1 million is where our E&D sits. This would ultimately result in a decrease of our net operating budget of approximately $1 million or roughly -3%, which in turn, when you apply the new assessment formula, would mean a decrease to Hamilton of approximately 1.7% and a decrease to Wenham of approximately 5.7%. But what does that have on our future budget? So when I build a budget, I always try to look 2 fiscal years out. So right now we're in 22, we're building our 23 budget, but I have to look, what effect does our 23 budget have on 24? So even though we want to implement these things in 23, what is happening around us that would translate into a negative effect in FY24? So if we were to just return those funds in 23, I have made a couple assumptions. The first one is a 5% increase to our gross operating budget. This is our average 5-year, year-over-year increase is roughly 5%. So I took our FY23 budget without the one-time expenses and applied a 5.13% increase, which is the $2 million you see here. From there, you can see the third line is a reduction of 3.1 million. This is the one-time E&D money that now goes away because we used it all in FY23. The result of that would mean an increase to our net operating budget of nearly $5 million or roughly 16%. Now, this number is staggering, which is why we're trying to control the kind of hills and valleys you see when you use E&D to supplement your operating budget. It's the same reason cities and towns don't want to use their free cash to supplement their operating budget because it creates a shortfall in the next year. This chart in front of you depicts a flat assessment shift. So if you were to then apply the same type of assessment shift that we saw this year, one of the towns could be up to almost a 19% increase. Now, again, there's a lot of assumptions in there, but this is me just trying to predict what kind of effect this has in 24. That would be the effect if we fully return the funds. But what I also want to articulate to you guys is what is going to happen as a result of that $770,000 that we are already applying to our 23 budget, just so you guys can see what we might be anticipating in FY24. Because again, I always try to look out 2 budgets ahead. What I did here was take our 23 budget as recommended, which includes the $2.3 million in one-time expenses. So you remove that $2.3 million from our 23 budget and then apply the 5% year-over-year average increase. What would occur is a net operating decrease of roughly 0.5%. But now, again, go 3 lines down, you can see the one-time E&D funds go away of approximately $3.1 million. The result of this, again, is an increase of approximately $2.8 million, or roughly 4.5%. So even though our operating budget would decrease 0.5%, the net result would be an increase of 8.5%. And again, this assumes no shift on the assessment. If the same type of a shift occurs now, one of the towns might reach a double-digit increase. So I walked you through our level service. I walked you through the correction to our grants, our new investments, and what we're proposing as one-time funds for our E&D. So when you wrap it all together, what does it mean for the assessments to the towns? What does it mean on our total operating budget calculation? So you can see at the top line, it would result in an increase of approximately $4.8 million, which represents approximately 12.5%. But remember, this includes the $2.4 million in one-time expenses added. It includes the $300,000 in grant additions. It includes the roughly $300,000 in new investments and all of our level service amounts. From there, you remove our operating offsets. You can see, hopefully you can see my mouse here. These 3 items here are the new grant sources. So $770,000 from the IDEA grant, the one-time ESSER funds of roughly 147, and the additional Title I funds. So that is why it has no effect on the town, because we added the same amount of expenses as we did to our offsetting revenue sources here. So you take your offsets off the top of your gross, and you're left with approximately $4.4 million increase, or roughly 11.93%. That same number carries up to the top here. From there, you remove all of our operating funding sources. Some of these are just placeholders for now. In the future budget, there will be a little bit of adjustments to this area. But for this conversation, we're seeing an increase of our total revenues of about $20,000, which is mainly due to an increase in Chapter 70 and a decrease to our interest income. But the last item to be removed from your net assessment is our excess and deficiency. Here is where you can see the $3.1 million being taken off the total assessment. And the net result is an increase of $1.2 million, or roughly 3.92%. So again, that same number at the bottom of the slide carries up to the top of this slide. So that is what we're working with for our net operating budget. From there, you apply the new assessment shift and the new calculation, which is 65.4% for Hamilton and 34.6% for Wenham. The net result of that is an increase of $1.1 million, or roughly 5.5% to Hamilton, and $130,000, or roughly 1.2% to Wenham. So what's next? So from here tonight, we presented to you what we presented to our school committee on December 2nd. At that time, we just finished wrapping up our one-to-one meetings. Prior to this, I have a lot of placeholders to account for a lot of the expenses, but the next presentation we make to the school committee on December 16th will remove a lot of those placeholders and put in actual refined numbers that I can report to you now are favorable to what we are presenting to you tonight. So that will come on the December 16th school committee meeting. I think that does it for. Stop sharing in a second.
Thank you,
I
Vinny.
don't know if we want to take questions or do a round robin or somebody else. It's up to you guys.
Yeah, so thank you very much for that. I think, does it make sense for us to just go around each board and ask any questions and see whether we can maybe start with, you know, well, it doesn't matter who starts, but I think that would be good to ask. That was a lot of information. So anybody that has a clarifying question, I assume that everyone might want an opportunity. Catherine, you look ready. Maybe just Wenham Select Board want to start?
I'm just ready to, I have no particular questions at this point, but I would open it to Gary and to Diane if you have any questions for anyone on the school committee or for Vinny. Now's the time. Gary?
Well, just one little point there. Who's going to manage the OPEB fund and what's the expected rate of return?
So currently that's going to be voted on the January 6th meeting, but the idea right now is to have the treasurer manage it and put it in the PRIM board. I think I always mess up that abbreviation. PRIM. Yes.
All right, thanks.
Yep.
I'm sorry, Gary, did you ask was there a second part about, I think you asked a second question.
Are you all set, Gary?
I just asked about the rate of return.
Oh, the rate of
Do we have an expected one yet?
So I talked to our actuarial and our auditors, and they're conservative at around 4%.
All right, thank you.
Diane?
How's everybody? Did you give Tosh, oh, I'm so sorry. I thought I was muted. I'm so sorry.
Okay.
I don't have any questions at this point. This is Diane Bucco. I'm just taking it all in. Thank you. It was very well presented, Vinny.
Hi, Diane.
So that's the Wenham Select Board.
Okay, and shall we stick with Wenham? How about the Wenham FinCom?
You need to unmute, Jim.
I have no questions at this point, but I guess maybe I missed it, Vinny. I could have. If we apply all the E&D money to FY23, the implications for 24 are fairly significant. Did I understand that correctly?
That's correct. If we applied the entire E&D and did not put any one-time expense offsets, and assuming, our normal growth rate on expenses and our lack of growth in our revenue, we would most likely be looking at double digits. So it's somewhere around 16% is what that slide projected. And again, that's assuming we end this year with no E&D, we don't have any growth in our other revenue sources, and our expenses come in at our, past 5-year average of roughly 5%.
And Vinny, can I just add one thing about that? And we won't have $2 million in our OPEB fund either. So.
Okay. FinCom, Wenham FinCom, any other comments or questions? David Reed is the liaison to the schools. David, I don't see David.
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, hi, David. You have any thoughts, questions?
I was just going to follow up with Vinny later, but on this year, you're working to keep it around that net 4% increase. With that exercise, was I reading what you were putting out right, that next year could still be 8%?
That's correct. And that is because of the $770,000 we committed to returning to the town. So again, assuming our average growth rate, and assuming we wouldn't end this year without any E&D, ultimately would mean the towns would have to backfill that $770,000 because that's technically a one-time revenue source. Kind of the same thing why, you know, towns don't use free cash for their operating budget. Same idea.
Okay.
Hi, it's Dave Molitano. Vinny, the last slide that you pulled up that had FY 19 to 23, would you mind pulling that up again?
Yeah, let me go back to this. Was it this one?
Yes, thank you. So if I'm looking at it, 19 was 27.1. Your projection of 34 point, we'll just say 34 is currently, the one before that had a projection of 41 million. Is that? There was a slide where at the top where you had, yeah, there you go.
Right there.
43 million. And
Yep,
explain,
that would be
explain
the
to me what- that was the E&D difference that you were mentioning prior. Is that correct?
Correct. Yep. Correct. That 43 million includes an additional 2.3 million of one-time expenses to offset the E&D. So we don't have that 16% kind of cliff fall in 24. So that's inflated because we've purposely inflated it with 2.3 million to offset E&D. In addition to that, there's roughly another $300,000 or 0.75% in grant corrections. So if you were to remove all those, you're left with about, I think off the top of my head, about a 6%, I think. Does that make sense or answer your question?
Yeah, what I'll do, if it's okay for you, I'll go through it again offline and give you a call just to make sure I'm understanding it. I don't want to keep all 33 people on the phone or on the Zoom.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Yes. Call me whenever you want. Yep.
Thank you.
Yep. No problem.
All right. How about, does the Hamilton Select Board have questions?
Yes, so Hamilton Select Board, any questions? I guess.
I guess I don't really have a question. I'm just kind of taking in all the numbers. I looked over the kind of previous presentation that was sent to us about a week ago, and just still trying to digest kind of all the numbers with our increases. And I guess, you know, I'm kind of thinking of the almost $10 million increase from 19 to 23 is quite a number, and trying to wrap my head around that increase every year. And our average increase seems to be about, I think Vinny, you said it was about 5.1 or 5.2% year after year, year over year. And it seems most of that budget driver is salaries. And then we've got transportation contract, I think you said was up. Do you anticipate that raising up? Have we figured out kind of a ballpark placeholder for that, or is it just too early to tell before we negotiate?
I think it's kind of too early to tell. I do have a couple feelers out with some other regional school districts to see what their contracts came in at last year to try to get a feeling of it, but we're thinking it's going to have a pretty good increase, especially with all the lack of bus drivers that they have right now, the increase in gas prices. We anticipate it's going to be a little heavy.
Yeah. And do we anticipate similar Chapter 70 funding for next year? I know our numbers were a bit lower this year, so if I'm correct, we'll have a little less this coming year based on our enrollment numbers.
So Chapter 70 has a rule that it's called the hold harmless rule. So they don't reduce it. You maintain at least what you had in the year before. So
okay.
There should not be a decrease unless there's something else that's factored in.
All right. That makes me feel a little bit better.
Vinny, I have a question. This is Darcy from Hamilton. Have you gotten any information about grants or any other forms of revenue that might be coming to us from the feds and the state with any of these big programs that are getting passed?
We did hear that there may be some ARPA funding coming our way, but that is not definite yet. So,
Okay, and when will you have that information?
it's kind of up to the state and the federal. They haven't really set a date on when they're going to release it. So I don't have an answer to that.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
So this is Rosie Kennedy. I will ask a couple of questions. So you said that the Chapter 70 funds overall are increased by 2% when you anticipated a significant decrease from last year. So my question is, over the last 2 years, there's been a significant increase in the school budget. If I'm correct, it's about 13.4%. So I'm wondering, does this E&D money include any of those monies from the past 2 years, or is E&D just from 3 years ago? I'm a little fuzzy on that.
Let me try to rephrase your question just so I understand. Are you asking if our current E&D balance includes any Chapter 70 overages from years prior to FY21?
No, I'm asking specifically regarding the increase in the school budget. It was 8.25 or 8.4% 2 years ago, just at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. And then last year there was roughly a 5% increase. Talking about the increase to Hamilton. So I'm wondering, there's also been some money that has come back from the state. You said your Chapter 70 funds actually increased by 2% when you were anticipating a 20% decrease. So you didn't lose any money from Chapter 70. And then secondarily, I forget what the source was, and I do apologize, I don't have it right in front of me, but a few months ago, there was about $847,000 that was awarded to Hamilton from the state in some sort of pandemic relief. So I guess my question is, I'm confused by where all this money might be, and here we are looking for almost 5.5% from the town of Hamilton. So I'm wondering where we might find the actual figures as to where all that money that was raised over the past 2 years, how can we account for that money to justify another 5.47% increase this year? It's important for me as a representative of the citizens to understand that. So I'll just let you, if you might at some point be able to answer that for me.
Yeah, I can briefly answer it. So that Chapter 70 money you're referring to, so you can see my mouse, correct? Or no?
I can, yes, thank you.
So our FY21 budget for Chapter 70 was roughly $3 million, but you can see our actual came in at roughly 3.7. So that additional approximately $770,000 we were talking about, because of the actual amount received over our budget, flows into this $3 million number. So $770,000 of this $3 million is a direct link to Chapter 70. But in
fiscal year 21, not in fiscal year 22. Is that correct?
So E&D always skips a year. So whatever we end in, yep. Okay.
Okay. So
I
okay.
And, yeah, and then in terms of the grant money, we did receive approximately $600,000 for our ESSER grant. We are only committing $147,000 to personnel, which is where that number comes from, somewhere over here.
That's right. It was ESSER 1, I believe.
Right there. Yep. That is ESSER 2 is what this one was. ESSER 1 is going to be is planning on being fully spent at the end of this fiscal year. So it shouldn't have an effect on 23. That was only a roughly 600,000. I'm not sure where you saw the $850,000 number. If you happen to see it again, you can send it to me and I can try to dissect where the other.
Yeah, it was on the state website. So I will perhaps look at that again. But I think in general, the money that was assessed from the towns, I feel frustrated that I see all these big numbers, but I don't really see a breakdown of all the money that the schools had in relation to the shutting down of the schools and the need for no custodian or cafeteria. Maybe I'm just uninformed, but I feel frustrated that I don't see an accounting for where all of those funds went. And here we are again. I feel very uninformed.
I can, during one of our presentations, let me stop sharing, sorry, hold on. During one of our presentations to the school committee in August, we did report out line by line where the funds came from. I can certainly forward that off to you so you can see it. It is, I did forward it off to the town managers to send out, but I can definitely send everyone the link and you can see line by line where every one of those $3.1 million came from.
Right, and also where they were spent, how they were spent as well.
Yes. Yep.
Thank you.
Of course. Yeah. I will email it off either after the meeting or sometime Friday. I apologize. I have a vacation day tomorrow, so I might send it Friday.
Vinny, I just had one more question kind of related to Darcy's question about the grant and ARPA funding. I know it's a little bit pie in the sky at the moment, but I'm assuming if we do get some of that funding, that you guys would put it towards capital and one-time expenses. I'm just kind of guessing that because that seems like a best practice instead of trying to get more FTEs that we couldn't pay for the following year. So just kind of curious if you had any kind of wish list or something like that for some capital things if that money does come through.
Exactly. That is what we are mainly spending all of the ARPA money and ESSER funds on. The only thing that is not is those 2 FTEs you saw represented here. Everything else is pretty much one-time expenses.
Okay, good.
So we don't incur, future costs.
Yeah.
To you guys.
Charles Bailey, I know from the school, has her hand up.
And Rosie, I know that Vinny will get this out to you, but one of the reasons that we have a high E&D is because we didn't spend all those funds. So those funds that you're curious about are the approximately $2 million that we're looking to put into OPEB in our future fiscal year budget that would be approved this year.
Right. Yeah, I understand. Thank you, Michelle.
Okay.
I understand that was from fiscal year 2021. I'm also inquiring about last year as well, but fiscal year 22, because the schools were essentially shut down for the whole year. So that's a further question. But I do understand, and I do understand that there's a lag in the E&D.
Can I jump in on that, Dana?
Yes, please, Eric.
Eric Tracy, I'm currently the interim superintendent. I really want to clarify that schools were not shut down last year. We were paying our teachers regular salaries, regular benefits, things like that still had to happen. They were working from home. They were full-time beyond, unfortunately, their lives and their work life and their home lives got crossed over during all this. But the majority of what we pay out is because we were still functioning as a school and a school system, albeit not at 100%, but we still were paying all of our employees across the school year. So there was never a moment when we were actually shut down and not operating. The 4.2 million original number that you saw that Vinny put out there initially was really the amount we didn't spend because we probably didn't use as much electricity as we usually would, or we didn't use as much natural gas as we would have. We didn't have professional development for teachers because people weren't coming together. We also didn't have people looking for supplies like classroom supplies and things like that. And I think it's got to be, I want to make that clear to everybody. We were functioning as a school and a school system. So it's not like we stopped and everything stopped. But the 4.2 million is the amount that we didn't get to.
Yeah,
I apologize, you're right. I misspoke. I apologize. I meant physically open for the students, and I was specifically referring to issues such as transportation needs, cafeteria workers, perhaps some of the office people were not needed to be in the school. So I did misstate. The schools were not shut down. I agree with you, and I apologize for that misstatement. I meant in terms of in-person full operations.
Sure.
Oh,
We did have to meet the needs of our contracts. That's
right.
The three contracts that we had to meet the requirements of those contracts. So our personnel were working. There was no one taken offline. I think maybe even your cafeteria workers were coming in to make lunches that had to be given out per government guidelines to kids that were at home that were required to have free and reduced lunch. So there were things actually happening that people may not understand were going on. You know, last year I was the high school principal. The cafeteria people were in every day creating breakfasts and lunches, waiting out front of the building for drive up pickup for all the students and families who qualified for free and reduced lunch. So in a lot of ways, everybody was working in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I'd almost say the cafeteria workers worked more last year than they ever done
Ever.
before. I know in my school it was that way.
Right.
Just one more question of the moment, kind of. I usually do my stump speech about OPEB, but I'm really glad to see that we're funding some this year. And I was wondering kind of what our future plans for continuing to fund it. I know we're probably 50 million or so in OPEB liability, so this is a good start. What's the next step after this?
So last year, or I should say this budget cycle so FY22, we did our initial investment of $100,000. We committed to increasing that by $50,000 every year after that, as long as we can, financially sustain it. So
yeah, I saw the 50 increase in the line items kind of earlier.
Yeah, exactly. So that's still the plan, is to.
Vinny, do you know once you get the fund established, what's the vested number for us? I mean, it changes kind of year to year, but
yeah, I think it's almost 40 million.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep, and I don't think that's planned until almost off the top of my head, it's like 2045 or something.
Okay.
But this investment of 2 million will knock off almost 3 years off that. So
okay, well, that's good.
So Hamilton Select Board, if you guys are done, I have just a couple quick things. So and I don't know if this is, I don't mean to sound like a whiner, so I'm not necessarily blaming anybody, but so I also, like, I don't know if it was Rosie or Darcy, got the proposal from your meeting on the 18th, on November 18th. And I kind of, studied that in preparation for this meeting. And this is different. And there were some things not in that presentation that would have been good to have been prepared for. And just one thing that's in that one, I don't even think it was in this. I just noticed that, like, so the Bucher, is it Bucher facilities or not, or Bucher school, whatever. When Bucher is a category in the budget, it seemed like a sort of a significant expense, and I just wondered what that relates to.
Yeah, I can answer both of those. So from your first one, the one on November 18th is this budget, but it excludes the one-time use of E&D. So the only thing that's not represented in there is 2 line items, one for the extraordinary maintenance and the other one for OPEB. So yes, in terms of a net number, it is $2.3 million difference. But again, that's as it was presented, there's no change to your net assessment as that was presented to what you saw tonight. The only difference would be that top line, the gross number, and then the inclusion of the E&D. Just to point out, and then your
Bucher
second question was about Bucher. Yes, so I can answer that. So in FY22, while building our FY22 budget, we incorporated a 7th kindergarten teacher. But at the time, we thought that was going to be housed at Winthrop. As it turned out, there wasn't enough room at Winthrop, and we moved it to Bucher. So that was an addition of a 1.0 FTE, or roughly around $90,000. In addition to that, increase to the grade, elementary grade bubble of 1.0 that you saw me talk about tonight is also in Bucher's DAC. So they went up nearly $200,000 alone because of the additional staff there. But you will see later on in our next presentation that some of that goes back to Winthrop, because again, there's not enough room at Bucher to handle both that 7th kindergarten and now a 7th first grade. But that is the main reason why you saw Bucher's increase so much.
And this is my last little question. So I saw there, like, so in addition of a social worker in the middle school and high school, which I fully support, that being, but I guess my impression, and part of it is that my wife is a school social worker, is that that there was sort of grant money and federal and state money that facilitated some of that hiring by a lot of schools. So I don't know if anybody can answer that. If not, that's fine. I'm just sort of a little bit of a curiosity.
One of the things I can speak about is from the ESSER funds, and Vinny showed this as approximately $147,000 in grants. In previous budgets, we haven't shown grant personnel numbers, and we thought it was important to put it into the budget so people could see the full picture. And there are 2 positions that are built in, a special ed teacher and a social worker, that were built into the elementary levels from ESSER funding. That funding allows, so it pays for those 2 positions this year and next year, which is what you see reflected at the $147,000 for ESSER funding. So there were positions, there were percentages of money spent that had to be spent specifically on things like a social worker, where the social emotional needs of kids had to be met. It was a 20% window of the original $651,000.
Okay, thank you. So I guess should we turn it over to the FinCom here?
Thank you. So this is Christina Schenk-Hargrove from the FinCom. I have a question actually about those. I think you said it was about 3 grants and then the positions that sort of offset those. And I hope I can even formulate my question, but you said that there were sort of grants, and so it's an increase in spending and an increase in income that kind of cancel each other out. But you also said this was just recategorizing positions that were already there. So how can they both be positions that were already there and new spending that's canceled out by those grants?
Yep. So the positions were already here, meaning they were already in the district. We just never reported them in the budget process. So we never had the expenses in the budget, nor did we have the revenue. That's why when you add both of them, they offset each other. But to show not only you guys, not only the community, but also our school committee, what is the real level service that is happening in our schools, and includes an additional 7 FTEs. So one of the reasons of adding those is, let's just say, a year or two from now, those grants are wiped out for whatever reason. That pretty much means that, those 7 FTEs are wiped out as well, or we have to come up with the money. So it's being more transparent with you. It's showing you the actual services that are provided in the schools today, and it will, in the future, portray to you what our actual reductions or increases are on an actual basis, instead of trying to explain to you or explain to anyone why we're losing teachers or personnel when the budget never changed. That makes sense?
Yes, thank you. And one other question with regard to the, the effect of not including offsets for sort of the same thing, including the money from the END and an expense to offset that. And I don't have a numbers brain, I have a pictures brain. So let me try to see how this works out logically. And it seems like what you're saying is, if we don't keep your percentage increase at 5.4% this year, if we take that number and reduce your percentage increase, then the next year, the percentage increase is going to be double. What would that look like if we just look at the numbers, not the percentage increases? It seems to me that the numbers, we would still end up ahead in the dollars, even though it looks, if you could go by that percentage increase, it's going to look like a huge jump.
I'm just trying to absorb your question.
You're trying to get your number, fit your number brain to my picture brain. Yeah.
Vinny, can I give it a visual from middle school?
Of course, yeah.
Okay, so a middle school visual would be if we're swimming along in the ocean, and then we took a dive, right? So we took away all of that space. Now we're underwater. Then when we come back up to the surface, you've added something, and then you get picked up. So it's like you have a double increase in 1 year, because in the first year you started out under the water.
Right. So, but if the water level is $0, you're saying if we save money this year and next year we have to pay money, it's going to look like a big jump.
Right.
But the number of dollars is going to be the same. If we looked at the flat number of dollars that the town, that you're taking out of our pockets.
I think it's not. And the reason is because what we're spending it on, that OPEB, is a one-time expense. And in the next year, we don't have that expense anymore.
Right. You don't have the expense. And the OPEB money went into our pockets instead of into the OPEB fund.
Exactly.
Which, I mean, is a question of what, if that's what we want to do. But
Right.
I think that percentage increase way of thinking makes it look scary, when if you think about the flat dollars, it's still money that's being taken out of our pockets.
You can think of it that way. The other way to think of it is the money's already out of your pocket.
Why?
Yeah, it's already in the school's pocket. So
Yeah.
we're trying to get some of it back. And the other thing, I guess, it's not so much a question, but what that says to me, like, oh, we would have this gigantic increase. The response to that is, well, we can't afford that. And so we shouldn't be adding positions or, costs this year, because we're not going to be able to afford that. I don't know that we'll be able to afford this year, but we're not going to be able to afford it next year. The answer is not, let's not put this in your pocket this year, because then it'll seem like a really big jump next year. Does anyone else from, I'm happy to let anyone respond to that, but I also wanted to see if anyone else from FinCom had any specific questions.
Yeah, this is John McGrath. Yeah, I'd like
I think we all do.
John,
may I? John.
Yeah, I think we all do. I think Christine is on to a better visual than has been painted tonight, or maybe a more complete visual. So what I'd like to propose is looking at this budget with the two town budgets sitting side by side by side, because this money doesn't belong to the school district. It belongs to the taxpayers of the two towns who, empower the school district to spend. So I think we need to look through the dollar lens and keep the percentages to the side for the time being. And where I'm going with this is we need to also worry about the other activities going on in the town. And I know the school committee is not focused on that, but both select boards and finance committees and all of us need to worry about what's going on in the general operation of the towns as well as the school budget. So I think there's probably a small subsection of this group can get together with Vinny and we can build a better visual that brings in the town budgets so that we all three entities can understand that and see what the impact of the school budget has on the towns as well. Because I believe, and I'm the new guy on the block here, and I think this has been a hugely transparent process. I've been through every number that Vinny's published, every deck, every slide. So I've really tried to educate myself, and I really think we need to impress upon the school committee and the administration what we're dealing with in the towns and have them worry about that a bit, maybe more than they do. So I'd like to redraw the story so that the town taxpayers can see the whole thing. And I'm going to worry a little bit about Wenham, even though I'm in Hamilton. But I think we need to worry about all three budgets side by side by side every time we do this. And I think we need to draw a more comprehensive view of what we're going to be saying to the taxpayers, because that's where the ultimate accountability rests. And I'm coming from is I've lived in town for 40 years. Both my kids and my wife went through the school system. I'm a huge Hamilton Wetham school district proponent. And my kids benefited greatly by these schools. So I think we need to bring the taxpayers' viewpoint in here and draw a better picture, as Christina is alluding to. It's something we can probably do in the better part of a week. And we can probably, create a little bit better visual than we have here tonight. And ultimately, I'd like to see some of the savings, the operating savings that the school generated last year, be made available back to some of the taxpayers to fund some of the other functions in the towns. So anyway, sorry, it took way too much time, but I kind of think we got a little bit more work to do working with Vinny and Eric as we go forward here.
Vinny, Dave Wanger, it's good to see you, albeit virtually, and thank you for your presentation. I have a few questions for you. The OPEB trust fund, is that now been established pursuant to the statutory framework? So it cannot be invaded for other purposes?
That's correct. Yep. It stays with OPEB. Is that your question?
Yeah. My question is, has the statute that establishes the immutable nature of a OPEB trust fund been adopted so that if there's an exigency, one cannot invade that fund?
That's correct. Just for OPEB purposes. Correct. Yes.
Okay. A couple of other questions, please. You had to make up for the, what was it, a 0.5% salary increase for
1%.
1%. That was about 230,000.
Correct. That was from our shortfall from FY '22. That
Right.
needs to be, that would, yep.
So my question is, if one were to use for that discrete amount of money, the E&D account, would that have the same prospective disastrous effect
In
Going
24, yes.
to the tune of 230,000?
Correct, yes.
So perhaps in the
Yeah, it would,
go ahead, please.
sorry. That you would have to then backfill the 230,000 in FY '24 along with the 770,000 that is already being returned for a sum total of, roughly $1 million.
But the prospective negative that you are portraying for us would be mitigated somewhat by only taking 230 out. It would be a less evil effect going forward.
It would be less evil compared to returning the whole 3 million, yes.
Yes. Has that been calculated? Or might you calculate that in terms of the modeling that Christina and John were talking about?
I can certainly do a model that would increase that by 230. That wouldn't take a lot, no.
Thank you. The placeholder for the change in steps, etc. Now that the time has ended, do you have an estimate of what that will save?
Yeah, it's not that it's saving, it's just less than what my placeholder was.
Yes,
it's
that's
about
what I mean.
75,000.
About 75,000?
Yep.
So that's a bit of money that could be utilized elsewhere without the disastrous evil effects going forward.
So I always have a tough time presenting things to you before I present it to my school committee, but the
Sure.
idea would be that 75 is just removed from what we presented to you tonight. It's not reutilized anywhere. It's just taken right off the top, and the towns would be assessed 75,000 less.
Okay. Do you have an estimate, if your budget as presented tonight were adopted, of the per capita pupil cost?
Nope, but I can certainly do one for you based on our current enrollment. Yep.
I would appreciate if you might
Where
do
would,
that.
where would you recommend he get the per capita number? Where is he getting the capita number from?
From your enrollment.
Oh, you're talking about the cost per pupil.
Yes,
Okay, not the cost per resident. Okay.
correct. Then taking up a bit on John's expression, when you compare the town budgets, school, both entities say it's level funded, but rather level service. But in fact, the schools are increasing in terms of at least one full-time staff, plus an administrative person, the payroll person returning. So it's not really level service, it's enhanced a bit. Can you tell us what percentage of the total budget is personnel related? And by that, I mean not only the compensation, but indirect benefits, including OPEB, including pension. What is the total nut relating to personnel cost as a percentage of the total school district budget?
You can just give me 1 second. I can at least give you a ballpark number.
Sure, I can give you 2 seconds.
I might give Vinny a moment to look for that. I know I have a couple of different people with their hands up. Are you ready, Vinny? Go ahead.
Yeah, it's about 75%.
Okay.
Can I understand that question again? So I understand the
Yes,
answer.
I'm asking Nick for the percent of the school district budget that's related to direct and indirect personnel costs.
75%.
Yep,
So
so that's all our salary. Yep, sorry. So that 75% is all of our salary plus our benefits.
Yes.
So it's approximately 75%.
Including the retirement benefits.
Correct. And that would include the Essex appropriation of almost $1 million. Yep.
So you can understand the tension here. No one wants to see the quality of education or the kids' lives impaired by the stark realities of fiscal budgets. But we do have a responsibility to the taxpayers. And when on the municipal side, the employee count is not increasing, for example, or salaries are not, when looked at over time, increasing at the rate that the district has chosen to negotiate. This has an incremental year-to-year aggregation of increased burden on the municipal taxpayers. I'm hopeful that Christina and John's suggestion in terms of a pictorial view of comparing town and school budgets, where they've been, where they're going, will be helpful to all of us to try to reach the right balance. That's just a gratuitous comment. I apologize for it. And Vinny, thank you again for your excellent presentation. I appreciate it.
Is it okay if we go to John?
Thank you. Good to see you.
Thank you. Dana, is it okay if we go to John Prulidge from the FinCom before we go to the other? I know people have had their hands raised.
Yeah, I do want to do give everybody the opportunity to ask questions. And I know a couple of school committee members have, perhaps responses or answers. I'm not sure. So yeah, let's do John. Let's finish up the.
Thank you. Yeah, first of all, Vinny, thank you for the presentation. Really appreciate sort of looking at the different uses of E&D and taking that 2-year look, because what I saw sort of a week ago makes a lot more sense now when I see it with the 2-year look. Also, don't want to speak for FinCom or anyone else. I do definitely appreciate the use of E&D for the OPEB fund. I think it's something that we'll all have to talk about in terms of how the E&D gets used, but that certainly, in my mind, can be a compelling use. That being said, on the flip side, I think when you take out the E&D and some of it, that 700,000 is really sort of subsidizing operating costs. I always like to look at really what is the gross, operating budget increase. And really when you're stripping out one-time expenses, which it looked like it was 6.5%, although I think David Molitano may have asked this question, what is it really if you take out some of the costs that were associated with those grants that have offsetting revenue? I think you might have answered that it was more like 6%. But ultimately, I guess my comment on that is I think how we use the E&D is going to be very important to this budget, but we shouldn't lose focus on really sort of scrutinizing that whatever it is, 6% increase in the operating budget, because that really, from certainly looking at Hamilton's point of view going forward, those kinds of budget increases they're unsustainable without a series of overrides for us, having done the math. So really, we're going to be very critical of, as comments have already come in from the Hamilton side, of certainly additional FTEs. On that note, I did have a couple of questions. For the ones that were funded, the sort of ESSER grant, I don't know if the IDEA grant also had FTEs associated with it. I understand from a budget point of view, so dollars, it's effectively neutral because they're offsets. how long do those grants last and what happens when those grants run out? Do we see a net increase in FTEs then? Or is the thought not to retain that personnel?
Yep. So the ESSER grant does run out. That has a end date of, I believe it's 2023, I think is the end date. So at the end of next year, I think it is over. The other two grants are entitlement grants. So as long as nothing, drastic happens at the federal level, those are yearly reoccurring grants, which is why we're trying to work them in to the budget now, so you can see what we're actually utilizing them for year over year.
And the thought, I don't know if this is a question for you, Vinny, or the school committee, for those positions associated with the ESSER grants, when those run out, is the idea that we would keep those heads in the budget, or because that would effectively be a net increase in FTE costs going forward?
I will hand that off to anyone else on the school committee who wants to take it.
I can take that one. Thank you, Vinny. The idea of bringing the specifically the two people in the ESSER grant at the 147K is to supplement this year and next year. The reality is we hope to not go beyond that. I mean, people that we put in place really know that they're hired under grant funding, and this is the direction that we're going. And then it's really, I've been superintendent for 2.5 months, so it's more of a kind of a scouring of where we're at, and then having those conversations with our budget holders. What are our needs, and how does that change over time? So a lot of it is supplementing the real high increase in social emotional issues we're seeing, the dysregulation in classrooms, and kind of the misuniformity, if you will, of the way, we're basically teaching kids how to come back to school, but also spending time dealing with lots of social emotional issues that are getting in the way, I guess, if you will. So I would guess the reality of that over time would be that those positions would fade away with the grant. It's not really my intention to continue to grow, and I agree. I forget who said it, but you can't sustain this number for a long time. I realize that and understand that the work's got to be done.
Great, thank you. Really do appreciate that. Another question on the elementary school bubble. Is that a 1-year bubble, or is it more of a continue, more like a wave, in a sense that
right now it's looking like a wave?
Okay.
Yeah,
that's because I know we've added FTs in prior years because of the bubble.
We're anticipating, usually we have 6 classes. So if you look at the 3rd grade and the 5th grade now, they have 6 classes across the district for those grade levels. The grades before that, 2nd grade, 1st grade, and then kindergarten are anticipating to continue to grow to a 7th section. So continuing to add. So yes, we lost students over time, but we're now seeing this kind of wave start again in the K1, 2, 3 level.
Great. Yeah, because I mean, that sort of, from my perspective, means that, looking out in future years, you're probably going to add additional FTEs as that sort of wave continues. So it makes me want to scrutinize even more any other sort of non-teacher FTEs, or if there's any way to reduce FTEs in other areas. Because at the end of the day, it's the FTEs that are going to have the biggest impact on our budget and our year-over-year operating cost increases. I think all the other questions that have been answered in the process. So yeah, thanks once again for the presentation. It was helpful, but I will echo also John McGrath's comments again that would certainly encourage more, specific dialogue, especially as we get our heads around, options on E&D and how to look at this from a, multi-town perspective. That would be very helpful.
Sorry, Dina, I did have one. Nick Tenson still is on my committee, who I think also had a question.
I want to give everybody the opportunity to speak, and I know I'm very mindful of the time. I do, Nick, I want you to get a chance to ask your question, and I hope maybe we can just, I do know I have other people that want to respond.
So let me go quickly. First of all, again, I'm one of the ones that will compliment you on your the OPEB contributions, and especially the size of it to get that number up there. I think there is, though, and we should always keep in mind that there may be a division where maybe it's not 2 million, maybe it's something else that could be adjusted there. And my quick question, well, my second comment is that I think you said there was a 5.2% increase overall over the last several years in the school budget each year, year over year. And that, when you compare it to a title, when you compare it to a 2.5, Prop 2.5, is over the 2.5% limits that we have. And so we end up needing to get closer to 2.5%. Otherwise, we're going to get overrides, and we're going to see that if not this year, next year. In fact, I think we're going to see it this year. The other question, though, that is more specific is with the FTEs, you had mentioned that even though the student population has dropped, you have a wave coming in with the kindergarten. But somewhere else, there must have been a drop that you were talking to about the in terms of the overall population. And so I'm wondering if we could get some kind of a history of the full-time equivalents by school, by position, and by number of students. If there's any way we can have that, if you have that kind of data, I'm sure you have that kind of data. If we could just share that with us. Did you get that, Vinny, or you look confused?
Just trying to see how I would, calculate it in my mind. I certainly have the position information. Just how we tie the students to each teacher will take a little creative thinking. So,
well, you may do it by.
I don't want to.
I was going to say you may take it by. I would separate, for example, teacher and administration, and then have number of students in the schools against the number of teachers in those schools. Make sense?
Yeah, we can. I can certainly attempt to do that and take a look at what.
DESE has most of these breakdowns done already.
History of that.
Right, DESE has most of these breakdowns done already. I'm not sure how much time we really want to take Vinny off of doing his day-to-day job to be running these numbers that already exist on the DESE website.
Direct me to him. Well, that's fine.
Yeah, no, I know what you're saying, but would, so what you're looking for is where did the decrease show up in the budget?
Correct. You see it as a decrease in the number of students,
right, but
there's an increase in the number of FTEs, and we understand that the kindergarten has to have it because they've got an extra wave of people.
Yeah, it was pretty compelling when we got our enrollment report that you could see like elementary was growing, but middle school, high school was shrinking. But it's difficult to get rid of you can't say, okay, we're just going to get rid of a biology teacher because you need that biology teacher to teach 4 sections, but not 5. But if you get rid of a biology teacher, you can't have the other 4 sections covered. So sometimes it's a little difficult to have that one-to-one relationship. But I just if it's going to be, I guess what I'm at, Nick, I understand wanting the information, but if it's going to take Vinny 3 hours to get that information, I'm not sure what's the value of the information.
And
the driver in a school system is number of students.
Right.
We've seen populations increase. I'm sorry, we've seen teacher headcounts increase, and we've seen students decline. And as a result, since that's 75% of the budget, we're seeing budgets that are in excess of 2.5%, 3%. And there is why?
Yeah, so what you're wanting to see is how the 23 or 26, I can't remember, positions that we cut 2 years ago. how those positions have either been returned or not.
That's helpful too. That's why I want to see the history.
Okay, so I think Vinny has something on that because I thought we saw that recently. So
Okay, very good.
because in actuality, there was a 23 or 26, I can't remember the number, reduction 2 years ago. So that enrollment correction, if you want, whatever you want to call it, happened 2 years ago.
If that's the case, then you would think that it would stay at that level, but it hasn't.
Right, some of those positions were added back in. So you're looking at, I think Vinny gave something to us on that recently. So that's probably not a big deal to find.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, and Nick, John McGrath, and Vinny and I were actually working on some of exactly what you asked for this week. He's been able to unearth some headcount data for staff and student population. It's not complete yet, but we've actually got started working on that. So I'll circle the wagons with all of you and work with Vinny to complete it. So he got this stuff to us in a matter of an hour and a half. So it's readily available. So I'll circle back.
John, and thank you, Vinny.
I'm gonna jump in here. It is 8:30. I have a few people that I have been, I've got a few people with their hands up. I would ask, I'm gonna ask if we can to have some of the people that have been waiting to be heard and try to be concise if you can. I think Julia was the first person who's been waiting patiently for quite a while. Go ahead, Julia.
Hi, I just have a really quick statement. Hi, everyone. Thank you. I think this is incredibly helpful. I'm so happy to see everyone here tonight. I had two things to say. Now, the third thing is Vinny's taking a vacation day tomorrow, everyone. So please don't email him. He needs it. He deserves it. I'm sticking up for him. So Vinny, you're taking your vacation day. The second thing I wanted to say is that I kind of, I'm live in Wenham and I'm on the school committee, but I'm also a taxpayer. So I'm very well aware of all of the implications to my budget and my pocket and everything that goes on, in my family. And then the third thing I would say is that the committee is actually very involved in the community, and we have our finger on the pulse. We know what's going on. We're part of the master planning committee. We serve on several boards. We serve on several other committees in the towns. So I do think we know a lot of what's going on, but I do think these meetings are very helpful. But I don't want people to think that we only look at what's going on from the viewpoint of our perch on the school committee. I do think a lot of us have a very well-rounded and holistic view of what's going on in the towns, and we're pretty invested. So I just wanted to say that. So thank you all. And thank you.
Thanks, Julia. Anna?
Hi, thank you. Yeah, this is great. I think I've always been a big proponent of us talking to each other. I think at this point I have 3 or 4 things, and I'll be very brief. I wanted to go back to something Rosie asked about that I don't think was really answered fully, which was the question about prior COVID money. And the short answer is in fiscal year 21, that $600,000-ish. Again, I'm with Vinny. I don't know where the 800 came from, but we did spend it on tents. We bought a ton of new desks. We bought a ton of hand sanitizer. The cafeteria actually lost money because that was a revenue generator for us. And so when the feds made school lunch free, which is awesome, I'm actually not opposed to that, but that was a revenue center for us. So I think Rosie raised a good question of like, what kind of happened to the money? And I just wanted, if you go back and look at several school committee presentations ago, there was some detail about what happened to that ESSER 1 money that could be helpful. So I just wanted to, I think Rosie was right about that. I want to affirm a little bit what Christina and Nick and John and others are saying about the one-time money. I do think how we frame it is important. So if you frame it as a percentage, it does look different. I kind of, in my mind, as a committee member, am saying, we have an overpayment, essentially. We didn't mean to have it. Some of it was Chapter 70, some of it was just money we didn't spend. So the district has this overpayment. And we could do a lot of things with it. We could return it. We could do the OPEB investment. So I completely agree with Christina and others that we should sort of separate that out, as we have to decide what's the right thing to do with that money and not focus on the year over year. But I think from a public perception, most people are not in the weeds like we all are. And so they might see it. So I think if we end up doing that, we just need to all commit, all of us, not just the school committee, to explaining to the public, if we do get a year over year, that is 12%, 15%, 16%, we don't have everyone attacking us because there's, you know, it's almost like a false measure. So I think Christina's right that it's not the most accurate, but I also think it affects public perception in a way that we have to all work together. That's one other thing. On the enrollment, Vinny, 2 school meetings ago, I think Nick gave you almost exactly what you're looking for. He gave us in the class reports a per teacher, per pupil, individual class size by school, by class, by teacher responsibility. So I was going to put it in the chat, but I don't think I have a chat function in this format. So if you go back to the exhibit, we actually totally have that already. So I think that might give you what you're looking for. And then the last sort of bigger picture idea is that if we separate out the one-time funds and then we look at the actual growth, right, which I think is the real heart of the issue, is what are we looking at year over year and why is it increasing? I guess I would sort of push back a little bit in this idea that we're growing in ways we don't need, or that somehow or another we're adding things that we don't need. And I think the idea to me is sort of level services is, you know, we're adding classroom teachers because our class sizes at the kindergarten level would be 24 or 25 students per one teacher, which is already, you know, we're already above the state recommendation for teacher and TA assignments at the kindergarten level. So I guess that to me is, we're not adding something we don't need. It's something we really have to have. The same thing with the social worker and the LEP students. I mean, maybe when the ESSER grant runs out, we won't want to do that. But frankly, I think we should have a social worker in our school. You know, that to me is a meaningful add, and it's not a luxurious one. So I guess this is sort of a philosophical question. You know, we're not adding things that are superfluous. We're adding them in direct response to actual student needs. And something like the payroll administrator, I'm going to speak up for Vinny a little bit too. I've never understood why the district doesn't have someone to do payroll. We're a $42 million organization without a half-time payroll person. You would never run a business that way. I mean, honestly, I can't imagine anyone in these boards saying, you have a budget of 42 million, and by the way, we're going to switch payroll into something else. Like that's irresponsible management. So I feel like I would love to hear, and maybe not tonight, but I would love to hear from other people what it is you think that we're adding that we don't need. I really want to know, because from where I'm sitting, and I'm right there with Julia, I'm watching my tax bill go up. I'm scrutinizing it. I have been a really hearty advocate for not making things unsustainable. But from where I'm sitting, I don't see that this is the district with bloat. I really don't. I don't see where the extra ads are. And the teachers' contracts are what they are. You know, we have the lanes and columns, but we also did a 2% COLA last year, you know, contractual 2%, 1 and 1. You know, that's going to catch up with us, and we can't do anything about that. So I think if people have things that they think that we don't need, tell them. I'm totally open to it, but I don't think we're at the point where if we cut back and say, let's combine people, like we're going to get 25 kindergartners in a classroom with one teacher. And the public was then going to say, whoa, what am I paying? Like, to me, that's where we are. So I think I just wanted to say all of that, but also say, this is the conversation to have, because I agree. If the 5 boards at this meeting can all agree on something that we can live with, then we can sell it to the public and explain it to people, and we'll get the support we need. But I completely agree with others that it has to fall into the master planning. And I have long been complaining about the underlying lack of revenue. And I think it's really important that we keep looking at that. I genuinely don't think the district is asking for things we don't need. I think that we are struggling to come up with the resources to fund basic services at a district that in many ways is kind of falling apart, both physically and in terms of some of the support for staff and places where we don't have enough staff to do what really need to do. So that's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Joe, I noticed you have your hand up. Do you have something you'd like to add?
Is Michelle's hand up too? I don't want to jump places. I think she was up before me.
Okay. All right. Michelle, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I just want to say I was glad we had this meeting tonight, because I really thought the OPEB had been an issue for several years, and that putting the 2 million in there was going to be a slam dunk. Like, it seems like the right thing. So I'm interested in hearing I was interested to hear that other people might not think that. So that's good for us. But I'm wondering, normally this is a meeting where the school committee shares some of their budget and their budget challenges, and then the town shares their budget challenges so that we can all understand each other. And I'm now kind of getting a sense that the meeting's almost over. Are we not going to be hearing from the towns tonight?
If I could try to respond to that, I think we normally only have one of these. We've in the past only had one of these meetings. We got 2 of these meetings. There's another meeting like this scheduled, I believe, for January 13th. And based off the format, we had switched this to an all Zoom format, which made it a little bit difficult. Ryan and I discussed earlier, late last week, that we weren't really sure how we'd be able to kind of manage presentations. So we hadn't prepared presentations from the town administrations tonight. Pardon me, I still, like all of you, still trying to take in a lot of what was presented tonight. There were some minor changes to what Vinny had presented a couple weeks ago. Not a big deal. And I can talk in really briefly in general terms about some concerns we have. But I think that, having the additional meeting coming up, we like the opportunity to be able to absorb this and maybe discuss it a little bit so that we can decide how to bring the information back to the school committee in a little bit more productive way.
Yeah.
I hope.
So one of the things that I'd like to hear is that, there's all this talk about inflation, and how are all 3 entities going to manage sort of budgeting, and what are there going to be their percent increases based on all of these projections about inflation? And then I think we need to all sort of talk about, like, what is that going to look like potentially in the next year? If we're looking at a 3 or 4% inflation or 6% inflation, but our budgets are only allowed to grow by 2.5%, like, that's going to be an issue. So I think we should all talk about what we're thinking about for acceleration of costs.
So I could, in the short term, in early numbers, I'll start to get at a little bit of that for you. I think that right now, the town of Hamilton on our side, for our end, is projecting about an increase in revenues for FY23 for all revenues of $1,266,196. The budget as presented to us right now seeks from the town of Hamilton for the school district an additional $1,168,460. So you'd be essentially taking up 92% of what we project for revenue increase. So any opportunity for the town to handle its projected cost increases is all but evaporated. There's $97,000 left to deal with contractual raises, 3 unions coming up, fuel costs going up, utility costs going up, 10% increase in projected healthcare costs from Maya. If we look at the historical data, I think that the number that was agreed to tonight is that on average, the school district's budget's been growing about 5.4% year over year, roughly. The town over the last 5 years has averaged about a 3.4% year over year growth. So when you don't go 5 years out with that, that means that the town's budget over 5 years grew by 17%, while the school department's budget over that same 5-year period would have grown by 27%. So you're continuing to widen the gap between the two. You're already at roughly 60% of our revenues on an annualized basis, and you're going to continue to take up more and more of that. I love what's been presented tonight. I'm very supportive of all the conversations. I think that we've had a better working relationship the last couple of years, particularly this year. I appreciate everything Vinny and Eric have done. We've met with them from the administration and a couple of times already. We're going to continue to do that. But we really need to get to, I understand that there's a revenue problem for the towns. There is, and we're going to have to continue to work together to find a solution to that. But it doesn't negate the fact that right now we're over, you're projecting to well overspend what we have the ability to raise. So, rough numbers, if everything were to stay the same right now, we're not completely done with our budget meetings. We're doing our budget meetings between our department heads and finance committee liaisons this week. We're not completely done there, but in rough back of the envelope numbers, if your assessment to us stays the same and doesn't change, we're probably looking at needing an override of a few $100,000. And then that doesn't mean that there wouldn't be another one next year, because you're continuing to propose 5% increase again next year on already a larger share of the budget. I like the way Christina put earlier the idea that we have to kind of look away from the projected percent increase in a 2-year budget, because I think and I don't have an answer for this, I think we'd want to study it a little bit more to see what is the actual dollar amount difference. So, and compare the two. So what's the actual dollar amount difference if we take back all of that E&D this year and don't have the increase, but next year we go up? Is it more, or does it compound? Because I'm beginning to think that Christina might be right. It might actually compound if we keep it in. So I want us to understand that better, but I don't have a complete understanding of that right now. Really want to look at that. I don't think that we're at all in the type of place where we were 3 years ago when I first got here. I think that the boards are all working together in a much more collaborative way. I think that I think we can come to a good, reasonable outcome here before we have to go to town meetings. I do say that I still think it's incumbent on us to do our best to avoid an override, and that is in, I think, all 5 of our boards in both of our communities and the school district's best interest, because we've got other big things that we don't know we need to ask the taxpayers for. The school district rightly needs to be pursuing a new school proposal down the road. We want to support that. I think the need is obvious, but we have other similar types of capital needs and investments on the town sides in both towns. How do we go to the taxpayers and ask for those debt exclusions if we can't show them that we can live within our means and our operating side? Yes, we need to find ways to expand the revenue sources so that we can expand our means, but we're living in the moment right now. How do we show that we can live within our means? So initial comments, I want to do some more talking and investigation. If the school district administration is open to something along the lines of what Mr. McGrath had recommended, i.e. a smaller subset of this group, remember the FinComs and the administration's meeting with Vinny and Eric at some point to kind of talk through some of these things and report back to the larger group again in January. I'll make time in my schedule for it. I know Alex will as well. I won't speak for one of them, but just my initial thoughts. This budget isn't as shocking or difficult to absorb as the last couple of years. I appreciate that. I think that a lot of thoughtful work has gone into it from the administration side, from the school leadership team side. I think we still have a little bit of work to go. That's just my opinion.
Thank you, Joe. I want to just, I know we've got a lot of boards here. I want to, to all the other chairs, we are over. I know we said we would end up at 8:30, so I want to be mindful of everyone's time. We do have a couple of people with their hands raised, so I'll kind of, look to the group. Do we want to give a couple more minutes and hear? I see some generalized nodding. Okay, all right. I see that Jim Purdy and Jen Carr have their hands raised. Jim, do you want to make a comment?
I know Jim had.
Thank you. Could I?
Sorry, did you say Jen or Jim?
Jim.
I said Jim, so why don't Jim go first and then Jen.
So I just want to make a few points on behalf of the Wenham financial situation. While the school budget obviously is more favorable to Wenham, Wenham has some struggles. We've had historical struggles We have current struggles and we have future struggles. We are facing a working deficit of $500,000, although we're not through the budget. We 97.5% of our revenue is resident generated. We have right now the highest tax rate of all 34 cities and towns in Essex County at $19.68. We are very cognizant, very aware, very sensitive to the fact that this is an increasing burden on our citizens. And we have very little commercial base. Hopefully with a master plan, we can do some economic development, but that's off in the future. So I just want to bring these things, to the attention of this group. How it impacts how we do our budget deliberations is pretty significant, actually. We have and talking about the OPEB, by the way, we have the last audit was a $4.5 million unfunded liability. This year, we increased that by a very modest 10,000 towards just paying the ongoing costs. So we have those OPEB problems. We have no reserve account for capital. We haven't contributed to our stabilization fund in years. So in operation terms, we really are struggling even with this particular budget from the schools, and we very much appreciate the efforts being made and Lenny's presentation. So we can go into more. I'm not going to go into any more detail on the budget tonight, other than to say we have a $500,000 problem. We're going to continue to meet over the next 3 months, but and then we're going to have a capital budget meeting on the 18th. So that has to be determined as well. But I just wanted to bring these things to the attention, particularly our high tax rate impact on the residents and how to mitigate that, or at least put more downward pressure on that going forward. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Jen. Did you want to chime in?
I just want to, I know Vinny didn't make this point, but he did at the last school committee that putting this $2 million in OPEB in the long run is going to save us approximately $10 million or more. So in reality, this is a good long-term decision for us to be financially stable and reduce our costs in the future. Because if we can turn $2 million into $10 million, that's going to be $8 million that the people don't have to pay later on.
Thank you. All right. So we are approaching 9 o'clock. I'm feeling like this was a really good conversation. I want to make sure that everybody feels like they've got one more person. Michelle, did you have something to say?
Oh, I'm just getting ready to make a motion.
Oh. Anybody that watches our school committee meetings knows Michelle is ready with the motion. Is there anyone else that feels like we haven't covered something? Okay, great. All right, Michelle.
I make a motion to adjourn the meeting of the Hamilton Wenham Regional School Committee at 8:55.
Second.
Second by Julia. School committee, all those in favor? Michelle?
Michelle Bailey, yes.
Oh. Yes.
Anna?
Yes.
David?
Yes. See you later, Vinny.
Michelle Horgan?
Yeah.
Michelle Horgan, was that a yes? I think we all right, and we are adjourned. All right,
yes.
I think the other boards need to sign off. The other boards need to
do that. Yes.
Yep.
roll call, take a roll call to leave.
Okay, I'll take our usual motion to adjourn from the usual person who makes that motion.
Diane Bucco, I make the motion to adjourn the Wenham Select Board meeting at 8:55 PM.
Second.
Okay, for a vote, Catherine, aye, Diane,
Yes.
and Gary.
Yes.
Oh, Wenham Select Board adjourns at 8:56. Thank you.
And I am Darcy Dale. I will make a motion to adjourn for the Hamilton Board of Selectmen at 8:56.
Second,
All right. And Sean?
I agree. Let's go home. Or I'm already home, I guess. Let's sign out.
Darcy Dale, aye.
Rosie Kennedy, aye.
Jamie Knutson, aye. We're adjourned.
Hamilton
All right.
Fin.
Can I hear a motion from the Wenham Finance Committee to adjourn the meeting, please? Adjourn the Finance Committee meeting.
Hi, it's Dave Reed. I move that we adjourn the Wenham Finance Committee meeting at 8:57.
Here a second, please.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded by Scott, I believe. All those in favor? Scott?
Scott.
Susan? You're muted, Susan.
Yeah.
David Reed?
Yes.
David Molentano? David M? I don't see David M. Jim Purdy, yes.
All right, I'll take a motion for the Hamilton FinCom.
So move.
That was
Second.
David.